My name is Myra, and at 58 years old, I just witnessed my only daughter, Amanda, get married last weekend. What nobody knows, not even Amanda, is that I inherited $9 million when my husband Thomas died 3 years ago. I kept it secret all this time. Thank God I did. Because just 3 days after the wedding, something happened with her new husband, Jake, that confirmed my worst fears. If you're watching this, let me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because trust me, this story might save someone you love. I met Thomas when we were both 23, fresh out of college, with nothing but student loans and big dreams. He was studying finance while working nights at a local restaurant. I was trying to build a career in marketing with an entry-level position that barely paid the bills. We fell in love over cheap coffee and conversations about the future we wanted to build together. Thomas always had a brilliant mind for numbers. While other couples our age were spending their money on trendy clothes and nights out, we lived frugally in a small apartment, saving every extra penny. Thomas would say, "Myra, wealth isn't about what you spend, it's about what you keep." Back then, I thought we were just being practical until we could afford more. After we married, Thomas landed a job at an investment firm. He worked incredibly hard, often staying late and bringing work home. His colleagues would brag about their expensive cars or vacation homes, but Thomas drove the same reliable sedan for 15 years. When I asked why he wasn't interested in showing off his success, he'd smile and say, "The loudest person in the room is rarely the richest." We had Amanda when we were 31. From the moment she was born, Thomas was determined to raise her with the same values that guided our lives. He didn't want her to grow up entitled or with a distorted view of money. "We'll give her everything she needs, but not everything she wants," he would say. Even as Thomas was promoted and his income grew, our lifestyle remained modest. Amanda grew up in a comfortable but not lavish home. We sent her to good schools and never worried about medical bills or essential expenses. But Thomas was adamant about not spoiling her. When her friends got new cars on their 16th birthdays, Amanda got a used Honda that she had to pay half for with her part-time job earnings. She complained at the time, but later told us she appreciated learning the value of work. Our family vacations were meaningful but reasonable. Instead of luxury resorts, we'd rent cabins by lakes or visit national parks. Thomas taught Amanda to fish during these trips, and I'd watch them standing side by side in the early morning light, talking about life while waiting for a bite. Those quiet moments built a bond between them that was beautiful to witness. Every Christmas we had a tradition where each family member would choose a charity to donate to. Thomas would sit with Amanda and discuss different organizations, helping her understand the importance of giving back. "Money is only valuable when it improves lives," he'd tell her. This was more than just a saying for Thomas. It was how he lived. As Amanda grew older, she naturally wanted to understand our family finances. Thomas was open about the importance of saving and investing, but vague about specifics. He'd discuss concepts like compound interest and diversification with her, but never revealed numbers. I thought it was just his private nature, but I later understood there was more to it. I had dreams of watching Thomas walk Amanda down the aisle someday, of seeing him bounce grandchildren on his knee and grow old together on a porch somewhere, watching sunsets. But life had other plans. The day Thomas died was completely ordinary until it wasn't. He had gone for his usual morning run, came home showered, and was having breakfast when he suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed. A massive heart attack, the doctor said. It happened so quickly. One moment he was talking about weekend plans, the next, he was gone. At 55 years old, Thomas left our lives with no warning, no goodbye. The funeral was a blur of faces and condolences. Amanda, then 24, was devastated. She had always been Daddy's girl. Watching her place flowers on his casket broke something inside me. We held each other up during those dark days, two women, trying to navigate a world that suddenly felt empty, without the man who had been our compass. 2 weeks after the funeral, Thomas's longtime attorney, Mr. Patterson, called, requesting a meeting. I assumed it was standard estate business, perhaps paperwork that needed signatures. Amanda offered to come with me, but I told her to focus on returning to work. Routine would help with grief, I thought. Mr. Patterson's office was in a modest building downtown. He had known Thomas for over 20 years, handling all our legal matters, from our first home purchase to Amanda's college fund. When I arrived, his usually composed face looked uncomfortable, almost nervous. "Myra," he began, after we sat down in his office. "Thomas left very specific instructions about his estate." He slid a folder across the desk. "Before you open that, I need to explain something. Thomas made some very successful investments over the years that he kept separate." I was confused. "Separate from what?" "From your family's known finances," Mr. Patterson said carefully. "The accounts and investments listed in this folder totaled just over $9 million. I remember staring at him, certain I had misheard. "That's not possible," I said. "Thomas and I had comfortable savings enough for retirement, but nothing remotely approaching that amount." "Thomas was an exceptional investor," Mr. Patterson explained. "He started with small positions in several technology companies before they became household names. He reinvested everything, never touched the principal. He was also an early investor in some real estate developments that performed extraordinarily well." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Pages of account statements, property deeds, and investment portfolios filled with numbers that seemed unreal. Properties I'd never heard of. Stock holdings in companies across different sectors. All of it adding up to a sum that made me dizzy. "Why would he keep this from me?" I whispered, feeling hurt and confused. We had shared everything, or so I thought. Mr. Patterson handed me an envelope. "Thomas left this for you. I think it explains his reasoning." The letter inside was handwritten Thomas's neat script covering several pages. He explained that he'd grown up watching his parents fight constantly about money after his father came into an unexpected inheritance. The sudden wealth had changed them, strained their marriage, and eventually turned his childhood home toxic with arguments and resentment. "I never wanted money to change us," Thomas wrote. "I wanted our family to live by our values, not our bank balance. I wanted Amanda to grow up understanding that worth isn't measured in dollars. Forgive me for keeping this separate, but I've seen how sudden wealth can transform people, rarely for the better. This money is for security, not luxury. Use it wisely, Myra, and please consider carefully before telling Amanda. Let her establish her own life, her own success before she knows about this." I sat in Mr. Patterson's office for over an hour, reading the letter multiple times, trying to process this revelation. Part of me felt betrayed that Thomas had kept such a massive secret. Another part understood his reasoning and recognized the love behind his decision. On the drive home, my mind raced with questions. What would I do with this money? Should I tell Amanda? How would this change our lives? By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had made my decision. I would honor Thomas's wishes. The money would remain a secret, at least for now. I would continue living much as we had before, using the funds only when truly necessary. That evening, Amanda called to check on me. We talked about the meeting, and I told her it was just routine paperwork, nothing special. The lie felt heavy on my tongue, but as Thomas had written, I wanted her to build her own life without the complication of sudden wealth. In the weeks that followed, I met with financial advisors recommended by Mr. Patterson. Together we created a plan for the money. I established a trust for Amanda that she would eventually inherit, but not until she was older, and hopefully more established in her own and identity. I designated portions for charitable causes Thomas had supported and set aside funds for potential future grandchildren's education. The rest remained invested, growing steadily while our day-to-day life continued unchanged. I still clipped coupons for grocery shopping. I still drove my 8-year-old car. The only real difference was the profound sense of security I felt, knowing we would be okay financially no matter what happened. Sometimes the weight of the secret was difficult to bear, especially when Amanda worried about her student loans or saving for a down payment on a house. It would have been so easy to say, "Don't worry about money, we have plenty." But I remembered Thomas's wisdom and kept silent, helping her in small ways that wouldn't reveal the full truth. Our relationship shifted after Thomas died. Amanda became more protective of me, calling daily and visiting more often. I saw her struggle with her own grief while trying to be strong for me. Sometimes we'd sit together looking through old family photos, sharing memories of Thomas, both laughing and crying. In those moments, I almost told her about the inheritance. But something always held me back, an instinct perhaps, or Thomas's voice in my head advising caution. About a year and a half after Thomas died, Amanda mentioned a new colleague at the publishing house where she worked. "His name is Jake," she said, her voice a little brighter than usual. "He's in financial management. Really smart mom." 2 weeks later, she called to say they were officially dating. After another month, she wanted me to meet him. "I really like this one," she said. At 27, Amanda had had several serious relationships, but no one she'd been excited enough about to introduce to me so quickly. I invited them for dinner on a Sunday. Jake arrived carrying an expensive bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers. Tall, with dark hair and a confident smile, he was undeniably handsome. He wore a designer watch that caught the light when he reached to shake my hand. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, "Amanda talks about you constantly. It's wonderful to finally meet you." There was something in his manner that put me slightly on edge, a polish that seemed too perfect, perhaps. During dinner, Jake was charming, asking thoughtful questions about my life and telling amusing stories about his work. He described his position at a financial services firm with obvious pride, dropping names of wealthy clients and mentioning the luxury car he'd recently purchased. "Life's too short to deny yourself the finer things," he said, refilling our wine glasses. "That's my philosophy." I noticed how Amanda glanced at him admiringly when he spoke. She seemed almost transformed in his presence, laughing more loudly, agreeing with his opinions before he'd fully expressed them. It was subtle, but as her mother I could see she was working to impress him. After dinner, while Amanda was in the kitchen getting dessert, Jake asked about Thomas. "Amanda mentioned he worked in investments too. Did he leave you well taken care of?" The question caught me off guard. It seemed presumptuous from someone I'd just met. "We lived comfortably," I replied carefully. "Thomas was always good with money." Jake nodded, his eyes scanning the living room as if assessing its value. "Smart man. So many people don't prepare properly. I always tell my clients that generational wealth transfer is where real financial security happens." When they left that evening, I hugged Amanda and told her it was lovely to meet Jake. It wasn't entirely a lie, he was polite and clearly intelligent, but something felt off, a nagging feeling I couldn't quite identify. Over the next few months, I watched Amanda change in subtle ways. She started wearing more expensive clothes. Her modest apartment was suddenly filled with new furniture. When I commented on a particularly pricey-looking handbag, she brushed it off, saying, "Jake says quality investments are worth it." Jake became a regular presence at family gatherings. He was always respectful toward me, but I caught moments when he didn't realize I was watching a flash of impatience, a calculating look. Once I overheard him on the phone in my backyard talking about a potential investment opportunity. "Trust me," he said to whoever was on the other end. "I know how to recognize untapped assets." 6 months into their relationship, Amanda started dropping hints about marriage. "Jake says at our age, when you know, she told me over lunch. "And Mom, I really know. He's everything Dad would have wanted for me: smart, ambitious, financially savvy. I tried to suggest they might want to date longer before making such a big decision. Your father and I were together for 3 years before we got engaged, I reminded her. Amanda frowned. That was a different time, Mom. Jake says in today's economy, combining resources earlier makes more sense. She reached for my hand. I wish Dad could have known him. They have so much in common. I bit my tongue. Thomas would have seen through Jake in minutes. My husband had valued substance and over show patience over immediate gratification. Jake seemed to represent everything Thomas had cautioned against. I tried once to share my concerns with Amanda. Honey, I just want to make sure you're seeing clearly. Sometimes when we're in love, we miss things. Her reaction was defensive. You just don't understand him, Mom. Jake is building something important. He sees potential that other people miss. Her voice grew harder. I thought you'd be happy for me. A week later, she called in tears of joy. Jake had proposed with a diamond ring that must have cost several months of his salary. Before I could even process the news, she was talking about venue options and dress shopping. Jake wants to do it right, she said. A celebration worthy of the life we're going to build together. When I expressed surprise at their rush to marry, Amanda's voice turned cold. I'm not getting any younger, Mom. Jake and I want to start a family soon. Why wait when we're both sure? That night I sat in Thomas's old study looking at his photograph on the desk. What would you do? I asked his smiling image. The inheritance sat untouched in its various accounts and investments, growing steadily. I could easily give Amanda a generous wedding gift that would start her married life without financial stress. But something held me back, the same instinct that had kept me from telling her about the money all this time. I made a decision that night. I would continue to keep the inheritance secret, at least until I was more certain about Jake. Thomas had wanted to protect Amanda from the potentially corrupting influence of sudden wealth. Now I wondered if I also needed to protect her from someone who might be more interested in that wealth than in her. Wedding planning took over our lives for the next 3 months. What I had imagined as a meaningful, intimate ceremony quickly evolved into something much grander. Jake and Amanda had selected the most exclusive venue in the city, with a price tag to match. Mom, it's only 1 day, but the photos last forever, Amanda said when I suggested a more modest location. Jake says this place books up a year in advance. We're lucky they had a cancellation. The guest list grew from 50 to 150. The simple dinner reception Amanda had initially described transformed into a 5-course meal with an open premium bar. Every decision seemed to push the budget higher. Designer invitations, exotic flowers flown in from South America, a photographer who usually worked with celebrities. When I asked Amanda about the cost, she hesitated. Jake's parents are contributing, she said, and Jake has some investments that are doing really well. She twisted her engagement ring nervously. We were hoping you might help too, Mom. I know Dad left you something. I agreed to pay for her dress and contribute $10,000 toward the reception, a generous amount from someone of my apparent means, but far less than what they were spending overall. Amanda tried to hide her disappointment. That's helpful, she said. Jake thought there might be more considering Dad's career. Your father believed in living within our means, I replied. We saved for retirement and your education, but we weren't extravagant. Jake called me that evening. Amanda's pretty upset, he said, his voice smooth but with an edge. I thought Thomas would have wanted his only daughter to have a beautiful wedding. Thomas would have wanted Amanda to start her marriage without unnecessary debt, I countered. There was a pause. Myra, we both know the finance industry. Professionals like Thomas don't leave their families with nothing. I'm just surprised you're being so conservative with whatever he left. The implication was clear. Jake believed there was more money and that I was withholding it. He wasn't entirely wrong, but his assumption and approach confirmed my suspicions about his character. The following weekend, Amanda invited me to meet Jake's family at their country club. His parents, the Crawfords, lived in a sprawling house filled with obvious displays of wealth, original artwork, antique furniture, and a pool house bigger than my first apartment. Mrs. Crawford took me on a tour pointing out the cost of various renovations. Mr. Crawford spent most of the evening talking about his car collection and real estate investments. "Jake tells us you're on your own now," Mrs. Crawford said during dinner. "Such a shame, and in this economy it must be difficult managing on a single income." Before I could respond, Jake interjected. "Myra's husband was quite successful in finance, Mother. I'm sure she's comfortable." "Still," Mr. Crawford added, "nothing compares to active wealth building. Pensions and savings only stretch so far." I smiled politely while seething inside. Their assumptions about my financial situation and their obvious concern about what Amanda was marrying into were transparent. That night in my hotel room, Amanda called to ask what I thought of Jake's family. "Aren't they great? They've been so generous with wedding planning." I chose my words carefully. "They clearly care about appearances." "Mom," Amanda sighed, "that's just how successful people live. Jake says once we're married, he can help you modernize your investment approach. He has strategies that could really maximize whatever Dad left." The weeks before the wedding were filled with tense conversations about money. Jake regularly made comments about Thomas's estate, always circling back to what might be available for their future. Once, when helping Amanda move some boxes at my house, I found him in Thomas's home office looking through a file cabinet. "Just curious about Thomas's investment approach," he said smoothly when I questioned him. "Professional interest." I started keeping important documents in a safe deposit box after that. Amanda and I argued more than we ever had. When I suggested she consider a prenuptial agreement, she was furious. "Jake would never marry me for money. We don't even have that much. It's just protection." I tried to explain. "Your father would have advised it." "Dad would have loved Jake," she insisted. "You're just resistant to change. Jake says older people often struggle with modern financial concepts." That hurt, but I recognized the words weren't really hers. Jake was actively driving a wedge between us, positioning himself as the financial expert against my outdated thinking. Each time I tried to raise concerns, Amanda became more defensive and distant. A week before the wedding, I found myself sitting alone in my garden, seriously considering telling Amanda about the inheritance. Maybe if she knew about the money, she'd be more cautious. Maybe she'd reconsider rushing into marriage. But then I imagined Jake's reaction to learning about $9 million. Would it make him back off or accelerate his plans? I decided to maintain the secret. If Jake truly loved Amanda for herself, the money wouldn't matter. If he didn't, better to find out before he gained any legal claim to her future inheritance. The night before the wedding, I gave Amanda her something old, a pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother. As I fastened it around her neck, our eyes met in the mirror. For a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. "Mom," she whispered, "did you know right away with Dad? Were you ever scared?" I sat beside her on the hotel bed. "Marriage is always a leap of faith, sweetheart. Your dad and I were terrified but excited. The important thing is knowing you're jumping with someone who will always try to catch you." She nodded to tears welling up. "Jake's ambitious, and sometimes that makes him seem intense, but he has big dreams for us." I held her hands. "Just make sure they're your dreams too, not just his." For a moment I considered telling her everything then about the money, about my concerns. The words were on the tip of my tongue. But then her phone buzzed with a text from Jake, and her face brightened. The moment passed. I kissed her goodnight and returned to my room, hoping I wasn't making a terrible mistake by staying silent. The wedding day dawned sunny and perfect. The venue, an historic estate with manicured gardens, looked like something from a magazine. Amanda was radiant in her gown, a vision that brought tears to my eyes. As I helped her with the final touches in the bridal suite, I couldn't help but think how Thomas should have been there to walk her down the aisle. "Dad would have been so proud," Amanda said, as if reading my thoughts. She had asked her Uncle Thomas's brother to give her away. The ceremony was beautiful. Amanda and Jake exchanged traditional vows beneath an arch of white roses. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the guests erupted in applause. I smiled and clapped along, pushing down the persistent worry in my stomach. During the cocktail hour, I overheard two of Jake's friends talking near the bar. "Jake finally landed a good one said. "Banker's daughter with inheritance potential." "Is that confirmed?" asked the other. "He's still working on it. Says the mother is sitting on a fortune but playing poor. Classic boomer hoarding." I moved away before they could notice me, blood boiling. At the reception, Jake's father gave a toast that focused almost entirely on Jake's professional accomplishments and ambitions. "To the beautiful couple," he concluded, raising his glass. "May your partnership be as successful financially as it is romantically." Jake's business associates dominated the guest list. Many seemed more like networking contacts than friends exchanging business cards between dances. Jake worked the room like a politician, making sure to introduce Amanda to important connections, while largely ignoring my friends and family. Just before the cake cutting, I needed a moment alone and stepped out onto a terrace overlooking the gardens. To my surprise, Jake was already there, speaking intensely on his phone. "After the honeymoon, I'll have a better sense of the full picture," he was saying. "The old lady is tight-lipped about the inheritance, but once we're family, I have more leverage." He paused, listening. "Trust me, Thomas Wilson didn't work in finance for 30 years without building a serious nest egg. It's just a matter of accessing it." I froze, then quietly stepped back inside before he could see me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set down my champagne glass. Everything I had suspected about Jake was true. He had married my daughter for money he believed existed. Money that did exist, but that he had no idea of the magnitude of. For the rest of the reception, I maintained a smile while feeling physically ill. I watched Jake twirl Amanda on the dance floor, whisper in her ear, make her laugh. She looked so happy, so trusting. I wondered if I should pull her aside, tell her what I'd heard, show her who she had really married. But this was her wedding day. I couldn't bring myself to shatter her happiness in front of everyone she knew. Before they left for their honeymoon in the Maldives, an extravagant destination I suspected they couldn't afford, Amanda hugged me tightly. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for everything." I held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair like I did when she was small. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything. Remember, I'm always here for you no matter what." She pulled back, smiling. "I know, but everything's perfect now." As I watched their car drive away, rice and flower petals still settling on the pavement, I felt a profound sense of dread. I had kept the secret of the inheritance to protect Amanda from people exactly like Jake. But in doing so, had I simply delayed the inevitable? Had I actually put her in harm's way by not warning her more forcefully? I returned to my empty house, kicked off my mother-of-the-bride heels, and sat in the dark living room for hours. Part of me wanted to call Amanda immediately to tell her everything. Another part hoped desperately that I was wrong about Jake, that he would prove to be better than I feared. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about Thomas and what he would have done. He had hidden the money to protect our family from changing, to preserve our values. Now I wondered if that secret might cost our daughter dearly. For 3 days I went through the motions of normal life while internally wrestling with my decision to keep quiet. Amanda sent cheerful photos from their overwater bungalow in the Maldives. They looked happy, Jake, with his arm around her on pristine beaches, sunset dinners, snorkeling in crystal waters. On the fourth day after the wedding, my phone rang at 3 in the morning. It was Amanda, her voice shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "Mom," she sobbed, "everything's wrong. Jake's gone." I sat bolt upright in bed. "What do you mean, gone?" "Amanda, what happened?" Through broken sobs, she told me the story. They had been having dinner at their resort when Jake received a call from his investment broker. He stepped away from the table, then returned looking pale. He insisted they go back to their bungalow immediately. "He started throwing things in his suitcase," Amanda said. "When I asked what was happening, he completely lost it. He was screaming about how I'd lied to him, how my family had deceived him." Jake had apparently been convinced there was a substantial inheritance from Thomas that we were hiding. He had made significant financial commitments based on this belief, including putting most of the wedding expenses on credit cards he couldn't actually afford. He said he'd done research on Dad's career and knew there had to be millions somewhere. Amanda continued, her voice hollow. He kept demanding to know where the money was hidden. When I told him there wasn't any big inheritance, that Dad had just left enough for you to live comfortably, he called me a liar. The argument escalated until Jake finally admitted the truth. He had married Amanda largely for her perceived financial prospects. He had investigated Thomas's career path and made assumptions about his wealth. He had even hired someone to look into our family's financial history. He said, Amanda's voice broke, he said he wouldn't have wasted 2 years on me if he'd known there wasn't a payoff at the end. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, my heart breaking for her. "It gets worse, Mom," she continued. "He confessed he's deeply in debt. The fancy apartment, the car, the expensive dinners, it was all an illusion. He's been living on credit for years, always assuming the next big deal would save him. He said marrying me was supposed to be his safety net." Jake had stormed out of their bungalow in the middle of the night, taking his passport and wallet. He left Amanda with a bill for the remainder of their stay that she couldn't possibly afford. "I don't know where he went," she said. "He's not answering his phone. I'm scared, Mom. I'm alone in a foreign country with maxed out credit cards. I don't even know how I'll pay for my flight home." "Listen to me," I said firmly. "I'm going to book the next flight to the Maldives. I'll be there as soon as humanly possible. In the meantime, talk to the hotel management. Explain the situation. Don't worry about the money right now." I spent the next hour booking flights and making arrangements. As I packed a bag, my mind raced with conflicting emotions: rage at Jake, heartbreak for Amanda, and a guilty sense of relief that she had discovered the truth before they built a life together. The journey to the Maldives took nearly 24 hours with connections. When I finally arrived at the resort, I found Amanda in their bungalow, eyes red and swollen from crying, still wearing her wedding ring. She fell into my arms like a child. "I'm so stupid," she whispered against my shoulder. "I should have listened to you. All those little warnings you tried to give me." "You're not stupid," I assured her. "You were in love. We all want to believe the best about the people we love." We sat on the deck overlooking the turquoise lagoon, a painfully beautiful backdrop for such an ugly situation. Slowly, Amanda revealed more details. Jake had apparently been telling people in his professional circle that he was marrying into significant wealth. He had leveraged these claims to secure loans and investment opportunities. Now that his lie was exposed, he faced not just embarrassment, but potential financial ruin. "He left me with over $20,000 in resort charges," Amanda said, staring out at the water, "plus all the credit card debt from the wedding. He said since I'm the one who misrepresented my financial situation, I should be the one to pay." I took her hands in mine. "Amanda, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you long ago." And then, sitting in that paradise that had become a prison for her, I finally revealed the truth about Thomas's inheritance. I explained the $9 million, the investments, the properties. I showed her photos of the paperwork on my phone. I told her about Thomas's letter and his reasons for keeping the wealth secret. Amanda listened in stunned silence, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, anger, and finally a strange, hollow laugh. So Jake was right. There was money all along. Yes, I admitted. But your father and I had good reasons. To lie to me, she interrupted. To let me think we were just comfortable when actually we were rich. To watch me stress about student loans and rent when there were millions just sitting there. I let her anger wash over me. She had every right to feel betrayed. We wanted to protect you, I said softly. Your father saw how sudden wealth changed people. He wanted you to develop your own values, your own work ethic, without the distortion that money can bring. And you? She demanded. What was your reason for keeping it from me after Dad died? I took a deep breath. At first I was just honoring your father's wishes. Then as time passed, I started to see the wisdom in his decision. And when Jake came into the picture, I hesitated. You didn't trust him, she finished. No, I admitted. I didn't. Something felt off from the beginning. The way he asked about money, the way he looked through your father's papers, when he thought I wasn't watching. I was afraid if he knew about the inheritance, it would only accelerate whatever he was planning. Amanda was quiet for a long time, watching the gentle waves lapping at the stilts of our bungalow. So, I married a man who wanted me for money I didn't know I had, while my own mother kept the truth from me. She laughed bitterly. That's quite a wedding gift. I'm so sorry, I said, tears filling my eyes. I was trying to protect you, but I should have trusted you with the truth. She looked at me, her expression softening slightly. What would Dad have done if he'd met Jake? He would have seen through him immediately, I said honestly. Your father could spot a fraud from a mile away. It was part of what made him so good at investing, recognizing real value versus empty promises. Amanda nodded slowly, twisting her wedding ring before finally pulling it off. I want to go home, she said simply. We flew back to the United States the next day. During the long journey, Amanda oscillated between tearful breakdowns and periods of quiet determination. I had used some of the inheritance money to settle the resort bill and upgrade our flights, no longer concerned about maintaining the illusion of modest means. What happened to Jake? I asked as our plane crossed the Atlantic. Amanda stared out the window at the clouds below. His father called while you were arranging our flights home. Apparently Jake fled to Singapore where he has some business contacts. He's trying to avoid creditors. How much debt are we talking about? His father wouldn't say exactly, but he mentioned several $100,000. She turned to me. The Crawfords are furious not because of how Jake treated me, but because his failed investment strategy might reflect poorly on the family. I took her hand. We'll figure this out together. Back home, Amanda moved temporarily into my guest room. We spent the first few days dealing with immediate practicalities, canceling joint accounts, consulting with a lawyer about annulment proceedings, notifying wedding guests of the situation. One evening, about a week after our return, we sat in the kitchen drinking tea. Amanda had been reviewing her finances, trying to untangle her own assets from the mess Jake had created. I still can't believe he left me with all the wedding debt, she said. That's $70,000 I don't have. Actually, I said gently, we do have it. The inheritance can take care of that immediately. She looked up surprise in her red-rimmed eyes. You'd do that? Of course. That's what the money is for security in difficult times. Your father would want me to use it this way. Tears welled in her eyes. I keep thinking about how different everything would be if I'd known about the money before. Would I still have fallen for Jake? Would I have been more careful? We can't know, I said. But I believe your father was right about one thing. Money reveals character. It doesn't create it. Jake showed you who he truly is. Better now than years into a marriage with children involved. Over the following weeks, Amanda began to heal. We worked with financial advisors to resolve the wedding debts and create a protection plan for her credit. Jake made no attempt to contact her, though his lawyer reached out regarding the division of marital assets, a laughable concept given their brief marriage and his deception. Amanda threw herself into work at the publishing house, finding solace in the structure and purpose it provided. She started therapy to process the betrayal and rebuild her confidence. Slowly, I watched my daughter emerge from the shadow of Jake's deception. Stronger, wiser, more cautious perhaps, but not broken. 3 months after the wedding disaster, we received news that Jake had been named in a lawsuit involving fraudulent investment practices. He had apparently been operating a small-scale Ponzi scheme, using new investors' money to pay returns to earlier clients while skimming substantial amounts for his lavish lifestyle. He would have had access to the inheritance, Amanda realized as we discussed the news. If I had told him, he would have found a way to access it, I finished, and lost it all. That evening, Amanda proposed an idea that surprised me. I want to use some of the inheritance to start a foundation, she said. Something to help people who've been victims of financial fraud. We could provide legal resources, financial counseling support groups. It was the first time she had referred to the money as something positive, something that could create good rather than complication. I think that's a wonderful idea, I told her. Your father would be proud. As the months passed, Amanda's foundation took shape. She partnered with financial educators and fraud investigators to create programs that helped vulnerable people protect themselves. The work became a passion that gave purpose to her pain. She also began to rebuild her personal life, reconnecting with old friends, and developing new interests. She moved into her own apartment, one within her actual means, not an extension of someone else's fantasy. I watched with pride as she carefully assessed her true needs versus fleeting wants, embodying the values Thomas and I had tried to instill. 1 year after the ill-fated wedding, we scattered some of Thomas's ashes at his favorite fishing spot, just the two of us. As we stood by the lake at sunset, Amanda took my hand. Dad was right about the money, she said quietly. It does change how people see you, how they value you. I understand now why he kept it separate from our identity as a family. He wanted you to know your own worth, I replied, independent of any bank balance. She nodded. I'm still learning that lesson, but I'm grateful for it, even though the teaching method was pretty brutal. She smiled wryly. I put my arm around her shoulders. Your father used to say that the true measure of wealth isn't in what you have, but in knowing what matters. I think I finally understand what that means, Amanda said, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Real wealth is having people who love you for yourself. It's having work that matters. It's knowing your own value even when others don't see it. We stood in silence as the first stars appeared. I thought about Thomas and the wisdom of his decision. The inheritance remained largely intact, now openly acknowledged between Amanda and me, but still separate from how we defined ourselves. It provided security, but not identity. It was a tool, not a purpose. Jake eventually settled his legal troubles with a plea deal that included restitution to his victims and a ban from the financial industry. The last we heard, he was working at his father's company, his grand ambitions considerably diminished. Amanda's annulment was finalized legally, erasing a marriage that had been built entirely on false pretenses. Looking back, I'm profoundly grateful that I kept Thomas's secret. Had Jake known about the money from the beginning, the damage could have been far worse. By hiding the inheritance, I unknowingly protected it from someone who would have squandered it without a second thought. More importantly, I protected Amanda from being trapped in a marriage that would have slowly drained not just her financial resources, but her spirit and self-worth. Today, Amanda is thriving. She's more discerning about relationships, but not closed off to love. She understands that true connection has nothing to do with balance sheets or potential gain. She values transparency and honesty above all else, a lesson learned the hard way, but thoroughly. As for me, I've found peace with my decision to keep the inheritance secret for so long. Thomas was right about the corrupting influence money can have, how it can distort perceptions and intentions. By hiding our wealth, we allowed Amanda to develop her own identity and values. Though the revelation came through painful circumstances, the timing ultimately protected her from a predator who saw her as nothing more than access to imagined riches. If there's a lesson in all of this, perhaps it's that our worth isn't determined by our bank accounts, but by our character. Money can't buy happiness, but it can certainly attract people who will happily take both your money and your happiness if given the chance. True wealth lies in knowing what to value, who to trust, and when to keep certain things like $9 million to yourself. Have you ever kept a secret that later proved to be the right decision? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember to like this video and subscribe if you want more real-life stories about family relationships and the unexpected lessons life teaches us. Thank you for listening, and may you always recognize your true worth beyond any dollar amount.